Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Seahawks recap show. Preseason week 2 game recap against the Dallas Cowboys. The game started on Saturday, August 19th at 10 p.m. Eastern. So, as I said in the last video when I did preseason week 1, I'm not staying up till 2 a.m. to do a of video, so I'm doing it on Monday. So this was a very exciting game, and let's talk about it. So in this game, like I mentioned before, we faced the Dallas Cowboys in week 2. So game summary: Seahawks won 22 to the Cowboys 14. So let's start off with Cowboys stats first. So total yards for the Cowboys was 293. Passing yards was almost 200 with 199. Rushing yards was 94. Yards per play was 4.7. First downs, Cowboys had 19. On third down, they went 6 for 13. And on fourth down, they went 1 2. Total plays 62. Sacks allowed was 4. Punts was 5. Penalty yards. They had 6 penalties for 60 yards. Fumbles lost. They had no fumbles lost. And interceptions thrown. It was an interception to Trey Brown from Will Greer. And the time of possession for the Cowboys was 29 minutes, 40 seconds. Now, for your Seahawks, they had 358 total yards. Passing yards was 217. Rushing yards was 141. Yards per play was 6.2. First downs, they had 17. Third down efficiency, they had 4 for 12. And fourth downs, they tried once and failed. Total plays, they had 58. Sacks allowed was 2. So the offensive line did get better. And punts, they only had 3 this time. So they didn't have 5 like they did last week. They only had 3. So that's a very big improvement. And the penalties, well, they had 8 and they gave up 62 yards on penalties. They had no fumbles, no fumbles. So, unlike last week, they had no fumbles to report. So that was a big improvement. And they had no interceptions thrown. And they had 30 minutes and 20 seconds of possession time. This game overall, I think they did really well. Still, again, the penalties are a little bit too high for my liking. I want to see that go down. We're going to talk about some of the penalties and things like that. And they also had another home game. So, 2 home games to start off the preseason. Great to see them win both. So, Ryan's focus players. Well, let's talk about Seattle. So, quarterback Colton Allers. He went 7 for 13 yards. He had 61. He had 0 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. But here's what I really like about him. He's 23 and he's an undrafted rookie, and he's putting up numbers in the run game. He had 7 attempts for 42 yards, 6 yards per average, and 0 touchdowns. But this man can run. If you watched the game, you realize that he can run. He can give off those design runs. And I think Pete Carroll is really going to enjoy having him maybe as a third quarterback, behind Drew Lock and Geno Smith. Now for the actual running backs. So Roderick Thompson. This is another guy that I looked during games and I looked at watching him with intent. And he's a guy that was signed in training camp. And he was a guy that I really hope he sticks to the 53 man roster when they're making decisions, because with the Seahawks, it's always been a theme, knock on wood, but it's always been a theme with them to lose at least one of the running backs to injury. So having 4 running backs on your roster that are very good, Kenneth Walker, DJ Dallas, Sir Roderick Thompson, and Zach Charbonnet would be a great 4 running back set. But Sir Roderick Thompson went for 11 attempts, 50 yards, 4.5 yards per play, and had one touchdown. Now, Jackson Smith in Jigba, the first overall pick, 20th overall of this year. He had a great showing, and he's really done really well. Him and Jack Bobo have done really well this preseason, and I think they both would really make the 53. I think Jackson is a lock for the 53, but I think Jake Bobo has made a case that he needs to be on this 53-man roster in terms of a depth option. But Jackson Smith, he had 3 receptions for 58 yards, averaged 19.3 yards per reception, and had 0 touchdowns. But he had that amazing play, just amazing. I think it was Drew Lock who passed it to him, and he torched the Cowboys secondary, and he almost got in for a touchdown, but he fell short on the ground at the 1 yard line, I believe. So didn't get a touchdown there, but was one of the main reasons why they scored one of their first touchdowns in the game. Now, in terms of the Cowboys, I wanted to focus on Will Grier. And the reason why I wanted to focus on Will Grier is because he went 13 for 18, 136 yards, 0 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Now, you might be looking at that and going, well, he threw 1 interception. Why would you focus on him? He had 136 yards, and he had the most attempts and completions out of Cooper Rush. So that's why he's the focus player. We're looking at the running back, Rico Dowell. He had 8 attempts for 38 yards, 4.8 yards per attempt, and 0 touchdowns. Him along with Deuce Vaughn. Deuce Vaughn is a pick that got picked up this draft for the Cowboys. He scored the touchdown, and him, Deuce Vaughn, Rico Dowell, and Tony Pollard will be 3 running backs that I hope stay for the Cowboys on the 53-man roster. And let's talk about the wide receiver for the Cowboys in Jalen Colbert. He had 4 receptions for 66 yards, average 16.5 yards per catch, and 0 touchdowns. This guy, you look at this guy, and he was everywhere. Like, I know he got no touchdowns, but you look at what he was doing on the field. He was always there, ready to make a play when he needed to. And, I was very surprised in the first quarter that he was getting all passes from not only Cooper Rush, but when Will Grier came in, he was the dependable target. So I hope he really sticks to the Cowboys' final roster. Now let's talk about the defense. D line, D tackle, Miles Adams. He had 3 solo tackles, no assisted tackles, 1 sack, and 0 interceptions. Again, just a great guy. With the departure of Al Woods, I think could Miles Adams stick to this 53 as maybe a third option or a second option behind Jared Reed. We'll see, but he's making a good case. He's making a good case to be a little bit of a run stuffer, which is what Seattle needs on that defensive line, but we'll see what he does. Now, let's talk about Trent Brown, cornerback, and I really hope he stays on the 53 when it comes time to make the cuts because this guy has really shown out. He's really a good corner, and I think he can be some very good depth behind the trio of corners we have in Kobe Bryant, Tariq Woolen, and now Devin Witherspoon. I think he's a fourth guy who can be very dependable, and let's talk about his stats. So he made some beautiful tackles, 4 solo tackles, 1 assisted tackle, 0 sacks, and 1 interception. And this interception, like I will talk about later, was massive. But let's talk about linebacker Boy Amafe. And you might be looking at his stats right now and going, oh, he only had 1 solo tackle and 1 assisted tackle, 0 sacks, 0 interceptions. He didn't show up on the stat sheet. Why is he your focus player? Well, if you didn't watch the game, you might not know. But Boy Amafe, man, he really showed up this game. He was in the quarterback's face. He didn't get many tackles and things like that. He didn't show up on the stat sheet, but he was in the quarterback's face. He was getting pressure. He was a guy that would try and tip balls whenever he could. He was trying to get in there, trying to get in there, trying to get in there. And this is exactly why he should be the starter coming in to regular season week 1, because I think this guy is going to kick everybody in the bottom this year, because this guy looks like a very improved pass rusher, and we need pass rush, especially off the edge. And he's really shown up in this game, and I hope this continues to the last game of the preseason. For the Cowboys, let's talk about Isaiah Land. He made 2 solo tackles, 1 assisted tackle. He had 1 sack against um, Fulton Allisters, and he had no interceptions, but he had that 1 sack. So I'm I was very wary of these D linemen, because these guys were just insane with some of their pressures, and it was forcing the pocket to be a lot more condensed and make sure that the quarterback didn't get beaten to a pulp. And that's why you see so many rushing attempts and so much yardage. But now we talk about DB, and I'm going to mess up his name. I apologize. I think it's Juan Thompson. Tackles, solo tackles, he had 6. Assisted tackles, he had 2. Sacks, 0. And interceptions, 0. And this guy, he is a safety. And you look at him, and he was, again, another guy. You watch the game, and he was everywhere. The only thing I would say about him is that he did get a taunting penalty that Jake Bobo drew from him. Obviously, I don't think it should have been a penalty. I really don't. I don't like the taunting rule. I think that that's just a little soft, but that's just my opinion. But now let's talk about linebacker Jabril Cox. He had 4 solo tackles, 3 assisted tackles, 0 sacks, 0 interceptions. And the Cowboys, man, they had a very good game on the stat sheet. And I know it doesn't look like it because they lost and they only had 2 touchdowns to their name, but that defense was something else. That defense stalled out a couple of drives, and if it wasn't for some big plays by Seattle's offense, that defense was still very good in what they were doing. So I was really impressed by them. But now we move on to Ryan's final thoughts. So, what went well? Well, in this game, it was a very big improvement. I think, again, like I've been saying in week 1 of the preseason, I think it was a great defensive game all around. Big interception by Trey Brown in the second half, in the third quarter, to give the Seattle the momentum to close out the game. They were driving, and the offense, you say what you will about the Cowboys offense in this preseason game in particular, but they had some times there where they were driving down the field, and if it wasn't for Trey Brown, they would have probably went up and scored their 3rd touchdown of the game. But Trey Brown just locked on the quarterback, locked on his eyes, and picked it off and did a very good job. And this is exactly what I want to see from a guy who is going to probably be 4th on the depth chart. This is a guy that I want to see make a few big plays, and this guy makes tackles look easy. In the first game against the Vikings, he was missing tackles. He wasn't wrapping up well, but in this game he was showing up, and that's exactly what I want to see from him, a big secure tackle. But with everything, we had to talk about what went well, but we also need to talk about what to improve on. So, first quarter starts need to be a bit better, just in terms of the secondary this time. So, in this game, Michael Jackson committed pass interference, and you know, it gave the Cowboys their first score because of it. And you look at that, and you know, Michael Jackson fighting for a spot. I think he could be a fifth corner, but he just needs to be better and more disciplined. But also in the first corner, the defensive line was not putting much pressure on the running backs. And they were putting pressure everywhere else, but their the D line was very weak in the first quarter, and that's what allowed the Cowboys running backs to just run up to the second level and allow like a Pat O'Connell who was there who made exceptional tackles. You don't want to see your linebackers having to tackle this much in the run game unless they're blitzing. Um, and it just needs to be better. The defensive line needs to get a little bit more block shredding and penetration. They did well with the sacks and pass rush, but now they just need to stop the run. And that's the biggest thing coming into the regular season that I think they need to improve on because there's going to be teams that still run the ball. And if they get up to the second level, some of these teams can really have their running backs just run all over the place. So that needs to improve. My final thoughts. Overall, this was a very great game to watch. Seattle deserved the win. However, the Cowboys really showed what potential they have in Cooper Rush and Will Greer, for that matter, and the rest of the Cowboys' backups. Even though their offense stalled out, even though that happened, even though Will Greer threw an interception, they had some plays, man, where it was just like, oh wow. Like you're looking at the secondary, you're looking at what they could do. Deuce Vaughn, the running back, is going to be a monster. I don't think he's going to be a third down back. I think he's going to be the second down back. And I really hope that the Cowboys do well this year because I think they can really challenge for that top spot if they just fix some of these errors that they're having. And, Seattle got lucky. I will just say that um, the one punt that was blocked, there was a blocked punt, and that's why it was 22-14 because they had a safety. But you look at that, and I think this is a very good Cowboys team, and the backups really showed up, even though they lost. The problem with looking at stats is that the stats don't tell always the full story. You actually have to watch the games. And from what I saw, this was a very decent game from the Cowboys, and I hope they can keep it up. But that is it for preseason week 2 of the Seattle Cowboys game. Make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe on this video. And I will see you next Saturday for the News of the Week, Episode 3 on the Seahawks Recap Show. This is Ryan Koki signing off. Go Hawks, go.